episode of Rooted and Restored. I'm so excited to be back with you guys again, really focusing on kids and adolescents in our community and some of the struggles that we're seeing them face. I'm really going to encourage you guys to pause here if you haven't listened to our last episode from last month. We've already gotten great feedback from it, and we really were focusing on what were some triggers for parents and really focusing on what their behaviors were telling them and what they were experiencing with parenting. And this month, we're really going to look at the flip side of this and what it looks like and maybe what our kids' behaviors are telling us and what's deeper than their behaviors. So for this episode, I have one of my colleagues here with me, Leanne. Hi. She also works a lot with kids and parents, so it was just a really good setup for us to just be able to talk openly about this subject today and just see where it leads to. Yeah. Awesome. So, for me, when I first, started talking about this and we decided this was the topic that we were going to discuss today, one of the big things for me is that I feel like a lot of parents can get stuck at the behaviors that some of their kids experience. I feel like we see a lot of dynamics when they come into our offices of these big behaviors, whether it's they're struggling in school, maybe they're getting in fights, they're having really big outward reactions at home with their parents, maybe they're not performing well in their sports, just different things that we get stuck on. And I always think it's good to look at behavior as like a sign or an invitation maybe to even just get curious with your kids about what's going on. Sometimes a great analogy can be even like a car. Check engine lights are horrible. But sometimes, right, they come on and it's not the end all be all, right? It's allowing us to say, oh, something's wrong with the car. What would it look like for us to look underneath the hood and see what that check engine light's trying to tell us. So I think this is the invitation where for kids, it's like, okay, this is a behavior. What's underneath that behavior? For sure. And I think that's a lot of times our approach and how we take things inside the therapy office and what we try to encourage parents to take home with them to kind of work through with their kids.
Definitely. I feel like that's who we are at Rooted, right? We're getting to the root of the behavior. And so, I don't know, I kind of look at it like, I use that like anger volcano analogy, where it's like anger at the top, like what's beneath it? Like there's so much that's connected to it that we're not, or that sometimes parents don't necessarily like dig deeper to, and that's our job here is to like dig deep to that and like what's laying beneath that, because it can be all different types of thing, lack of connection in the home or communication in general. I mean, it could go on and on.
Yeah, and the anger iceberg, solid like analogy to use, or it's a great tool. I love sending it home with parents or with kids, but also it can be changed instead of it being anger, right? It being the behavior. So any behavior you're seeing can be on the tip of the iceberg because that's what we pay attention to, right? That's what's provoking the frustration a lot of times for parents. But then if we look underneath it, right, it is insecurity or maybe lack of acceptance or self-esteem or all these other things that are underneath it that sometimes as a parent it's really hard to sit with them because we're getting so frustrated with the behavior that they're having that it's hard for us to learn how to sit with them in those moments.
No, 100%. So I have a question for you.
Oh yeah, take it away.
What do you feel like are the behaviors that the kids right now are coming in with that parents are really concerned about?
So I think, like I named, I think a lot of common things sometimes are, their grades at school, maybe the friends that they're choosing, technology time, right? Getting in fights or struggling with relationships or even getting in fights or arguments at home, right? Not having a lot of regulation at home or again, like in other communities or other spaces. I would say, like, I challenge, too, in that sense, like what you said, like, with Rooted, we don't like staying on the surface. We like getting deeper. So sometimes those are signs for us to say what's deeper, right, that we're not seeing. And I challenge, too, what I think I'm met with in the office pretty frequently is that all these things can get roped into one big thing. And what underneath it is that these kids don't know how to communicate their feelings. We always say, right, like kids' brains aren't fully developed, and a lot of times behavior is how kids choose to express themselves or how to communicate before they can express their feelings. Like, it's all easier to say, I hate school, I never want to go there, it's the worst thing in the entire world, instead of saying, I really don't like to go to school because it makes me feel really sad because I don't have any friends and I don't feel like I fit in, right? That's so vulnerable for a kid to be able to say that, and until it's also modeled, right, going back to the last episode, right, as parents, if we're not modeling what it looks like to talk about our feelings or get to that deeper, more vulnerable place, our kids have no idea how to do it either.
And that leads me to, like, on the flip of that, right, when parents model the bad behavior, the kids, I feel like, are more likely to model that behavior that is being modeled at home, right? Whether it's between mom and dad or the way mom does things, right? The kids are going to model that. So I always tell parents, I'm like, they are going to model what they see, right? Not what they're necessarily told to do. So I feel like that comes up a lot for sure.
Yeah, and I think in a perfect world, it's so easy to say, right, when you sit down with your kids, being able to be calm and, like, explore and investigate with them. But sometimes that's not always practical, and it's sometimes the baby steps. You being able to name that that's happening for you, and even circling back and being able to have that conversation, because sometimes I would say it can come across as judgment for kids, right? If we're performing badly in school and a parent comes in, right, you care about it. So you're provoking all these emotions, this frustration, right? Like, you want it to end. And then for kids, that can sometimes feel like judgment. And then every kid's different, but maybe they might shut down in situations like that. And then our judgment or our quick reaction to things can end the behavior very quickly sometimes. But then again, we're not looking for long-term solutions out of that, because that behavior is going to end, but those deeper feelings that they're experiencing is still there. It's just going to get stuffed and cycle over, and some other behavior is going to eventually come out that's due to that deeper rooted feeling that they're experiencing that they might not even know how to name yet. Right?
No, definitely. And I think you said something there, like naming it. There's so much power in naming something, right? I suggest to clients all the time, parents are like, I don't know, like, this is how I feel. So tell them, like, tell them they might be feeling the exact same way that you're feeling. And then the connection, oh, you're feeling like that, mom, you're feeling like that, dad, right? The connection starts to happen. Like, they don't know unless you express, right? If we model self-expression or emotional expression to the kids are more likely to model the same thing back.
Yeah, and even sometimes in those moments when you need to take accountability, you're still modeling for your kid, like, I'm human. I can make a mistake. Like, what does it look like to take ownership for that mistake, right? And then you're modeling that for your kid, that in turn, right, they're not going to a place of defensive-ness or anything like that. They're being modeled from you because you're teaching them everything, right? What it looks like to be able to take a step back and say, I messed up. I didn't mean to do that.
So that leads me to another question.
Okay.
When a parent comes in and like, Callie, I've been like doing what you've been telling me to do. Like, I'm modeling this change for them. It's been like a month and a half and they haven't changed. What would you tell them?
Well, I would say a lot of times, like, parents are a very pivotal point in kid therapy or child therapy in general, right? Like, we love roping in parents because they're with us for an hour, but they are at home with you majority of the time. So I would hope that we were probably having some more check-ins, but that doesn't always happen with every, like, dynamic that we have that comes into the office. But I think it's about exploring what's going on, because most of the time, right, like, in any situation, there's probably some yellow flags that everything's probably not, like, smoothing along perfectly and it's still a struggle. There is an essence where I'd say change doesn't happen overnight.
For sure.
Right? We like to create awareness, then we like to create acceptance, and then we put things into action. And sometimes, like, in each of those stages, like, everybody's different. You might be stuck in one of those stages for 3 months, right? Or 3 weeks. It really truly just depends. And it depends that there's a whole family system, right? So everybody's doing their own work and navigating all these things. So there's a lot of different components that come to it. So I would say, if you as a parent are calm and collective and you're trying to start modeling that with your kids, a month in is not a long time. Sure. Also, I'm hoping, right, you're not having blow up or explosions or big crisis situations happening every single day. So there might have only been 1 or 2 incidences, too, that you've experienced throughout that month. Fair. So those are learning curves and still stepping stones. And a huge thing, too, is just being able to, after, I have some family dynamics that come in pretty frequently, and a common thing that I feel like I do experience is they're coming in and it's like these huge explosions, and then kids are like, oh, well, my parents aren't saying anything, so like I'm just kind of tiptoeing out of my room the next day and everything's fine, right? We're gonna go back to normal. And then parents feel the same way sometimes, where they're like, okay, well, I don't want to deal with that again. I kind of got out how I felt. They know what the expectation is, so like we're just gonna leave it alone, right? Totally makes sense, right? The thought process behind it. But then I'd say, then we're gonna end up in another situation where the same thing's gonna happen, right? Because you're just staying at the surface.
Definitely.
Instead of being able to say, let's have a sit-down conversation and, right, like, what happened yesterday? Yeah. Everybody had a lot of emotions.
100%. Right?
Making a game plan for what's going to happen the next time this happens. So hopefully we don't get to a place of escalation that is that extreme.
For sure. For sure. And I feel like sometimes it's brushed under the rug.
Yeah.
Right? And like anything, you can't see it because it's underneath the rug, right? But now maybe it's creating like a bump. Like what would it look like to take that out and to actually deal with it, which is kind of what you're alluding to.
Yeah.
But yeah, what would it look like to take that out and to deal with that? So yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard and scary thing, I think, on multiple places, right? For the kids, it's really hard, but also for parents, it can be really hard too. Something that I think is always important to point out, that like age doesn't change skills, right? Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes we get stuck in, our child's, maybe their room's always a mess, their backpack's a mess, their room's a mess. They struggle with cleaning. Maybe they're 16 and their car's a mess too, right? Sometimes we can get into a place of like, okay, well, they'll outgrow it, right? Like, they're boys, they're just messy, like, it'll get better. But then I challenge, like, what if it doesn't, right? What can we do in that moment as a caretaker that's like, okay, they're displaying some things that I don't want them to do at 26 years old, so what can I do to help model for them or create something different? Change the expectations, set some different boundaries for them so that they learn it's a requirement that some of these things have to be met so that we can change the skills. And it's no longer, oh, well, that's just how they are and they're 12 and they're a boy. Instead, it's like, no, this is really hard for him to learn and we've had to struggle through it. Yeah. But one day when he's 27, he's gonna be like, Mom, thank you so much for making me make my bed every day because I still do it today. Yeah.
And I think that can go into like, right, cycles, patterns. I think you kind of named that too, right? I know we do sometimes in therapy, right, the infinity cycle, and we name the different stages, right? And then how do we get out of that cycle, right? I think too, doing that is bringing an awareness to, clients, to parents, for them to see, okay, well, it looks like we're on like stage 4 of the cycle. We know what's coming next. And usually that's the blow up, phase. So like, how do we like turn around and U-turn this, right? And creating the conversation. And maybe sometimes that does have to be modeled, going back to that, by parents first, for their kids to be able to do it for themselves.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, I think the saying too, unfamiliar hell over, familiar hell over unfamiliar heaven. Because we can get frustrated and we can start sensing that like what's happening isn't working anymore, but it's also really scary to cultivate change, or there's an unknown to it. But also, right, the unknown to it too can be from a parent standpoint that you've never parented any differently because how were you parented, right? So there's an unknown of like, okay, like this is what my parents did, so I'm naturally doing this and it's not working. What do I do, right? So sometimes I say it does take a village. Yeah. That doesn't mean that you're not doing something right. It just means that like kids can be difficult. Yeah. And sometimes being able to not get to the point where it's like, okay, I don't know how to deal with them. I don't know how to deal with this problem. Like, somebody else fix it because I can't do it. But instead getting to a point of, like, surrender of, like, okay, like, what I'm doing isn't working, right? Like, we're trying this, and, like, I need to bring somebody else in, rope them in, tag team, right, if you will. I maybe need some help to be able to figure this out. Like, I'm exhausted, but also, like, my kid really needs help, too, because we're repeating this cycle, and it's not ending, and we need to figure out how to get out of that infinity loop, because we're not going to keep surviving if we keep operating this way.
So I feel like a lot of times, too, I see parents, they, like, going back to last month's episode of, like, parenting out of shame and guilt, right? They, number one, they parent out of that way, so maybe they're giving more and into more things than they should be. But then on the flip side of that, they're parenting from a place that they wish they were parented. But sometimes, like, I find that my clients, like, they're like, no, that's, like, not what I need, right? What would it look like for a parent to go to them and to ask them, like, the power of, like, naming it, like, what do you need? Because, like, mom is struggling right now, and I think communication would be good between us so that we can figure that out. And right, I want to support you because I love and care about you. And so I find that a lot, that it's not being asked, it's kind of being tiptoed around rather than addressed.
And sometimes too, I think the power of therapy with kids is that sometimes it is truthful that being able to take them out of the environment or where some of the stressors or frustrations are within the family dynamic and putting them somewhere else where there is no bias, you can get to the root of what's going on a little bit easier, because they're not afraid to hurt your feelings or fearful of what they're going to say. Sometimes you have to build that rapport first. But it's a little easier sometimes to pull those things out. And then once the trust is created, right, they can already name what they feel like they need. So then once they communicate that to their family or their caregiver, right, there's a lot of fear a lot of times in the beginning. But then once they do it, it's like, whoa. That felt so good, right? And then most of the time, the parent on the receiving end loves and cares for them so much. They're like, okay, let's do that, right?
I feel like we've, like, named a few different tools just kind of throughout our conversation. And I feel like just let's, like, fully name them right here, right now. What are practical tools that parents can use? And I feel like number one, it's the naming it, right? And asking open-ended questions, right? Not really trying to, like, dig to catch them in something, but to dig so that you can help support them in their needs, right? It's getting to the needs of it at the end of the day.
Sometimes I think about, there's, like, this video that's been going around on TikTok where parents will put their kids in front of the camera and then put, like, M&Ms out. They're like 2 years old or, like, toddlers, and they'll be like, okay, like, mommy's gonna be right back, like, don't eat it until I come back. And it's a super funny, like, video to watch, and most of the time they listen. Sometimes the kids, like, stuff their face with the M&Ms. But sometimes on the flip side of it, I feel like it is, like, trying to find the, like, gotcha moment. So piggybacking off of what you said, I do think that's so important, because naturally when our kids disappoint us or do some of these really big behaviors and we react out of it, it does sometimes feel like it's the gotcha moment. But then that also teaches our kids, okay, we make mistakes, repercussions right away. Instead of looking at it like, okay, like, I'm gonna sit in this with you, I'm gonna create connection with you, right? What's going on? I want to be here for you. And then after creating the connection, now it's looking at the correction, right? Like, as parents, you can still hold space and connect with your kid, but then being able to say, I still have boundaries, and boundaries are good for you. So this is what's going to happen still.
I feel like that's very much like the growth mindset of it all, right? Mistakes aren't, like, right, creating the connection first instead of the correction first, right? I feel like too, when kids approach, like, or they get in trouble, right, something happened at school, whatever, they know they're gonna get in trouble, and mom or dad react in a way, they model a reaction that's like the why behind it all, not like, you did this, right? The correction, the connection part, right? And they're like, whoa, mom and dad, like, approach that super different, and I'm, like, not used to that. Right? And it's a good thing at the end of the day. Number one, like I said, parents are modeling that. But also on the flip side of it, like, kids might, like, get, like, weirded out, defensive, like, who are you and what have you done with my parents, right? But in the interim, they are learning because you're modeling that for them.
Yeah, and showing your kids that you can grow at 35, 45, 25, like, is still amazing thing to be able to model. And also, like, failing forward. I think I can name for myself, like, every situation where I've had tremendous growth out of, I failed first.
So true.
But then instead of, like, staying down here, right, I've allowed myself to say, like, okay, what can I learn from this? And what am I going to do moving forward, right?
Yeah.
So your child's failing at something, that's really hard for you. That's really hard for them. Yeah. But you can't save them from sitting in those feelings, right? Those feelings are important for them to feel because they might not always be the only kid in class that can't read, right?
Yeah.
But it's going to translate to something bigger in the future because they're going to be less than in some areas where some other people might thrive in and they might struggle. Yeah. So them learning how to sit and cope and deal with that is extremely healthy instead of A, us as parents rescuing them, or B, being able to sit in it with, or not sit in it with them, lack thereof, and then in turn them have unhealthy coping skills or display these behaviors that we don't put an end to or explore with them, so they keep getting more unhealthy as time progresses.
Definitely. And I think you mentioned something earlier too, like kids don't have this vocabulary, this verbiage to like name emotions, right?
Yeah.
The tool that I think of is the feelings wheel. And I pull that out in sessions to help the kids name like what they're feeling, right? So explain a little bit what the feelings wheel is.
Yeah, so sometimes I would say I've pulled it out with a 6-year-old client and I've pulled it out with a 16-year-old client. And I think sometimes the concept of it can feel very kiddish. But I think it's naming too, as parents, as we're growing and evolving, as like on the same trajectory as our kids, because we're always growing. Like that's the goal. We've never reached this finish line. You might not have created this structure with your child since they were an infant. Sure. And you might be trying to rewire how you're parenting at the age of 15, 14, 16. So sometimes it is going back to maybe some of more kiddish things. We're going back to the drawing board. So I think sometimes don't see this and like name it as that. Allow it to be a curiosity for you to explore, because any teenage client I've had that has tried this has been like, oh, okay, like it kind of helped. So you can be pleasantly surprised by it.
For sure.
And I always say too, right, like kids don't necessarily struggle with the feelings that they're having, but they're struggling that they're sitting in those feelings alone. Because they don't know how to navigate it, right? They feel trapped by it. So being able to create the awareness, like you said, or put a name to it, and then you're able as the parent to be there while they're doing it, then you can ask some of these investigative questions where you're truly just exploring with them, right? So there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but most of the time I especially if like conversating is a very hard thing, we just point sometimes. Like that's where the family's at. It's like, okay, we just had an explosion, we've calmed, we've regulated ourselves, like, okay, how did we feel about this past situation that just happened? And sometimes, right, I always say if they're younger, they start in the middle. You can find a feelings wheel on Google. You can find it on Pinterest. This is from Amazon, so they're all over the place, and they make so many different kinds. But usually if they're younger, we stay in the inside on like sad, anger, fear, happy, surprise, disgust. As they get older, right, sometimes we might start out here. You can either start outward to go inward or inward to go outward. You don't always need to get to like a specific feeling in here, but it's been interesting too, because sometimes I've had clients that say like, I'm angry, but then when we get out here and we look at some of these things, they're like, oh, I'm actually sad. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And going back to the anger iceberg, right? Like sadness, embarrassment, like all these things can be under it, because sometimes anger is a secondary emotion, but society makes it more acceptable or normalized to go there out of a protective mechanism than being able to have some of these other vulnerable feelings.
Definitely.
And then as a parent, you being able to sit down too, I say, and model. Also, like, okay, like past conversation we just had, like, I'm angry right now. Yeah. Right? Like, I'm frustrated that this keeps happening. And then once you both name it and it's out there, right? And instead of using, like, accusatory language, right? Being able to say, like, I feel this way when this happens, allows you both to express yourself. And then it's like, okay, instead of having a tug of war, you being on one side, your kid being on this side, and you're both pulling at it. Instead, there's a problem.
Yeah.
We both don't like it. Yeah. We both know it's not okay. What would it look like for us to both be on the same side? Maybe not see eye to eye, but we both want the same result. Exactly. So let's work on it together to be able to get to that other side.
Yeah, it's so true. And I also think, just kind of alluding to the anger volcano analogy thing, right? Sometimes it's like the kids are showing anger because all of those things that were underneath it have been like building up and building up, and like a volcano, naturally it's gonna erupt, right? And it's gonna show, right, like bad grades in school, it's gonna show anger, outbursts, disrespectful attitude. But again, what is beneath it all? So getting curious and using the feelings wheel as a tool.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be something you use all the time, right? As you guys start getting more acquainted with talking about feelings and what that looks like, instead it's being able to say that you have the ability after a conversation to say, like, okay, I felt this way because you said these words to me in the car, Dad, and it really hurt my feelings and it activated me, right? The goal is to be able to get to a place where we don't always use this thing, right?
True.
But it's a baby step in the beginning, right? We can't run before we know how to walk. So
I feel like this is a great place to kind of just like close it up. It's really been on our hearts to do a parent seminar. So if that is something that you're interested in, if this episode or last month's episode really resonated with you, we're going to be touching on some of those topics in the seminar, and just keep an eye out for that to come sometime this summer on our social medias at Rooted Therapies.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us again today, and it truly does take a village to raise children, and we understand that at Rooted. So if you would entrust us, we would feel honored for you to call us and have a free 15-minute phone consultation with Leanne, and just get you roped in and allow us to be able to help serve your family. So thank you for joining us again, and we can't wait to see you next month.